In this video lesson, we'll investigate the demise of the Whig Party and the presidency of Franklin Pierce. Meeting in Baltimore, the Democratic Nominating Convention of 1852 startled the nation. It stampeded to the second dark horse candidate in American history, an unrenowned lawyer politician named Franklin Pierce, who was from New Hampshire. Pierce was a weak and indecisive figure. He served without real distinction in the Mexican War. He was known as the fainting general and had a fondness of alcohol. He was enemyless because he had been inconspicuous, and as a pro-Southern Northerner, he was acceptable to the slavery wing of the Democratic Party. His platform came out emphatically for the finality of the Compromise of 1850. The Whigs, also convening in Baltimore, missed a splendid opportunity to capitalize on their record in statecraft. Able to boast a praiseworthy achievement in the Compromise of 1850, they might have logically nominated President Fillmore or Senator Webster. But having won in the past with other military heroes, they turned to another old fuss and feathers, Winfield Scott, perhaps the ablest American general of his generation. Although he was huge and an impressive figure, his manner bordered on haughtiness. His personality not only repelled the masses, but eclipsed his genuinely statesmanlike achievements. The Whig platform praised the Compromise of 1850 as a lasting arrangement, though less enthusiastically than the Democrats. With slavery and sectionalism to some extent soft-pedaled, the campaign again degenerated into a dull and childless attack on personalities. Democrats ridiculed Scott's pomposity, and Whigs charged that Pierce was the hero of many a well-fought battle. Luckily for Democrats, the Whig Party was split. Anti-slavery Northern Whigs swallowed Scott as their nominee, but deplored the platform, which endorsed the hated fugitive slave law. Southern Whigs, who doubted Scott's loyalty to the Compromise of 1850 and especially the fugitive slave law, accepted the platform but spat out the candidate. General Scott, victorious at the battlefield, met defeat at the ballot box. He was stabbed in the back by his fellow Whigs, notably the South, as Franklin Pierce wins in a landslide. The election of 1852 was fraught with frightening significance, though it may have seemed very tame at the same time. It marked the effective end of the disorganized Whig Party. The Whigs' demise augured the eclipse of national parties and the worrisome rise of purely sectional political alignments. The Whigs were governed at times by the craziest opportunism, and they won only 2 presidential elections. Both of the men winning were war heroes. The Whigs finally choked to death trying to swallow the distasteful fugitive slave law. Their great contribution was to help uphold the idea of the Union through their electoral strength in the South and the eloquence of leaders like Henry Clay and Daniel Webster. They both contributed powerfully to the preservation of the United States. At the outset, the Pierce administration displayed vigor. His cabinet contained aggressive Southerners, including as Secretary of War one Jefferson Davis, who would be the future president of the Confederacy. People of Dixie were determined to acquire more slave territory. The intoxicating victories of the Mexican War stimulated the spirit of manifest destiny. The conquest of a Pacific frontage and the discovery of gold in California aroused lively interest in the land routes of Central America, chiefly in Panama and Nicaragua. Many Americans were looking even further ahead to potential canal routes and the islands flanking them, notably Spain's Cuba. They lusted for new territory after the Compromise of 1850 seemingly closed most of the lands of the Mexican cession to slavery. Southerners took a special interest in Nicaragua. A brazen American adventurer named William Walker tried repeatedly to grab control of this Central American country in the 1850s. Backed by an armed force recruited largely in the South, he installed himself as president in July of 1856 and promptly legalized slavery. But a coalition of Central American nations formed an alliance to overthrow him. President Pierce withdrew diplomatic recognition, and he died in 1860. Nicaragua was also a vital concern to Great Britain, the world's leading maritime and commercial power. Fearing that the grasping Yankees would monopolize the trade arteries there, the British made haste to secure the solid foothold at Greytown in Nicaragua. This challenge to the Monroe Doctrine raised the ugly possibility of an armed clash. The crisis was surmounted in 1850 by the Clayton Bulwer Treaty, which stipulated that neither American nor Britain would fortify the secure exclusive control over any future Isthmian waterway. The agreement seemed necessary to halt the British. America had become a Pacific power with the acquisition of California and Oregon, both which faced Asia. The prospects of a rich trade with the Far East now seemed very possible. Americans had already established contacts with China, and shippers were urging Washington to push for commercial intercourse with Japan. The Mikado's empire had withdrawn into isolationism and had remained there for over 200 years. The Japanese were so protective that they prohibited shipwrecked foreign sailors from leaving and refused to readmit to Japan their own sailors who had been washed up on the west coast of North America. But by 1853, as events proved, Japan was ready to emerge from reclusion. The Washington government dispatched a fleet of awesome, smoke-belching warships commanded by Commodore Matthew Perry, brother of the hero of the Battle of Lake Erie. By judicious display of force and tact, he persuaded the Japanese in 1854 to sign a memorable treaty. It provided for a commercial foot in the door. But it was the beginning of an epochal relationship between the land of the rising sun and the Western world. This achievement attracted little notice at the time. Sugar-rich Cuba, also lying off the nation's southern doorstep, was the prime objective of Manifest Destiny in the 1850s. Supporting a large population of enslaved Africans, it was coveted by the South as a most desirable slave territory available that could help them restore balance between the free and slave states. Cuba was a kind of heirloom, the one important remnant of Spain's once mighty New World empire. Polk, the expansionist, had taken steps to offer $100 million for it, but the sensitive Spaniards had replied that they wouldn't sell it to the Americans at any price. With purchase completely out of the question, seizure was apparently the only way to pluck the ripening fruit. Private adventurers from the South now undertook to shake the tree of Manifest Destiny. In 1850 to 1851, 2 filibustering expeditions set out. Each numbering several hundred armed men, they descended upon Cuba. Both feeble efforts were repelled and later ended in tragedy when the leader and 50 followers were shot and strangled. An angry mob of Southerners sacked Spain's consulate in New Orleans as a result. Spanish officials in Cuba rashly forced a showdown in 1854 when they seized an American steamer called the Black Warrior on a technicality. Now was the time for President Pierce, dominated as he was by the South, to provoke a war with Spain and seize Cuba. But the major powers of Europe, England, France, and Russia, were about to become bogged down in the Crimean War, and hence were unable to aid Spain. A cloak and dagger episode followed. The Secretary of State instructed the American ministers in Spain, England, and France to prepare confidential recommendations for the acquisition of Cuba. To meet at Ostend, Belgium, the 3 envoys drew up a top-secret dispatch, soon known as the Ostend Manifesto, which urged the administration to offer $120 million for Cuba. If Spain refused and its continued ownership endangered American interests, the United States would be justified in wresting the island from Spain. The secret Ostend Manifesto quickly leaked out, and northern free soilers, already angry by the fugitive slave law, rose in an outburst against the manifesto. Confronted with disruption, the Pierce administration was forced to stop its schemes. Clearly, the slavery issue deadlocked the territorial expansion in the 1850s. The North was developing a renewed appetite for Canada, and the South was coveting Cuba. Neither section would permit the other to get the apple of its eye, so neither of them were able to get either. We'll continue to discuss the struggle for new territory between the North and South in our classroom lessons.